Have you ever wondered what happens behind the tightly sealed doors of power? When the cameras are off, the microphones go silent, and the people we think we understand begin playing a different game altogether? What if everything, the scandals, the tweets, even the impeachments, were just pieces on a much larger board? And what if, after years of chaos and spectacle, Donald J. Trump made a move so unexpected, so cunning, it left both allies and enemies stunned? It all began on a frosty February morning in Palm Beach, Florida. Mar-a-Lago shimmered under the soft glow of sunrise, the American flag tugging in the breeze as if already bracing for what was to come. Inside, beyond the security gates and marble columns, Trump sat alone in the private study. No cameras, no aides. Just him, a red folder, and a decision years in the making. To the public, he was the familiar figure, the bombastic showman, the relentless firebrand who never truly left the stage, even after leaving the White House. Love him or hate him, no one ignored him. For years, the world watched him. Rallies, lawsuits, investigations. But no one saw what was happening beneath the noise, not even the people closest to him. And that morning, something changed. He picked up the phone, tapped a number he hadn't called in over a decade, and simply said, "It's time." 3 hours later, an unmarked jet left a private airfield near Miami, its destination sealed. On board were no aides, no security detail beyond 2 trusted men in suits, and a small metallic case that hadn't seen daylight since the end of his presidency. What was inside? No one knew. Not even the Secret Service. Across the country, political analysts were busy dissecting his latest social media post, convinced he was gearing up for another attention-grabbing rally. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Atkinson's administration was knee-deep in foreign policy drama, blissfully unaware that a storm was building just beyond the horizon. But something was stirring. A handful of insiders, former intelligence officers, disillusioned cabinet members, and even a journalist who had spent years trying to decode Trump's playbook, had started whispering. The signs were there, they claimed. A pattern buried beneath the headlines. A plan that had been slowly, methodically set in motion. And now, it was finally unfolding. What if the chaos was never the strategy, but the cover? What if every misstep was calculated, every stumble choreographed? What if Trump was about to pull off the most audacious political twist in modern American history, not to return to power the old-fashioned way, but to render the old way obsolete? As the jet disappeared into the clouds, one thing became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a comeback, it was a takeover, and the first domino had already fallen. 3 days after the mysterious flight from Florida, Washington was still reeling from an unrelated diplomatic blunder. At least, that's what they thought. News networks were ablaze with coverage of President Atkinson's failed summit with the European Union. Headlines screaming, "America isolated again," while economic advisors scrambled to contain the market tremors. But buried beneath the noise was a more curious story, one that didn't make the front page. Yet, a leak. A thinly veiled document had surfaced on an anonymous server used by whistleblowers. It was raw, unverified, and vague enough to be dismissed by most. But for those who read between the lines, those who knew, it sent a chill through their bones. It referenced something called Project Janus, marked with a presidential seal dated January 17, 2021, Trump's final full day in office. It was no coincidence. Miles away, in a modest townhouse tucked behind an overgrown cul-de-sac in Alexandria, Virginia, Maggie Hart stared at her screen, blood draining from her face. A former intelligence analyst turned freelance investigator, Maggie had spent the last 4 years obsessing over Trump's final days in the White House. Not out of malice or fandom, but curiosity. She was there, in the Situation Room, when he made a cryptic order that no one could explain. "Prepare the Janus package," he'd said. No one questioned it at the time. The chaos of the Capitol riots was too fresh, but Maggie remembered, and now it was back. Within hours, she was on a secure line with her former boss, Glenn Rowe, a grizzled CIA veteran who'd long since retired to Arizona, but never really let go of the job. His voice crackled through the encrypted signal, low and cautious. "Maggie, you sure about this? I saw the watermark. The file's real. And if that plan ever got activated, we're talking about a complete systemic breach, not just politics, infrastructure, communications, financials. He was silent for a beat. You think Trump flipped the switch? She hesitated. I think he never let go of it. Meanwhile, at Mar-a-Lago, Trump was no longer taking calls. His usual inner circle, Don Jr., Eric, even Jared, were all out of the loop. Only two men remained close. Thomas Crane, a shadowy legal strategist known for vanishing entire lawsuits, and General Marcus Breyer, former head of Cyber Command, who'd disappeared from the public eye months earlier. They were working in silence, behind blackout curtains and firewalled networks, drafting something. Not legislation, not campaign materials, something bigger, something executable. Outside, Trump's political critics were mocking his absence, calling it a coward's retreat. Supporters were confused. Was he running or not? Why the silence? And then, the first system went dark. Low-tier satellite communication channel used by the Federal Reserve cut out for 6 minutes, unexplained. Followed by a testing glitch in the East Coast's energy grid. Coincidences? Maybe. But Maggie knew better. This wasn't a glitch. It was a countdown. And whatever Trump had set in motion, it had already begun. Maggie barely slept. Every hour brought new alerts. Quiet system failures in isolated departments, cryptic resignations inside federal agencies, and strange blackouts of archived communications from Trump's final months in office. It wasn't just noise. It was precision. Something coordinated. But how? He wasn't even in office anymore, at least not officially. Her gut told her this wasn't just some rogue power play. It felt elegant, controlled, which terrified her more than chaos ever could. She flew to D.C. the next morning, bypassing security protocols using a contact at the Department of Homeland Security. She needed access to one thing: the Janus terminal. Most officials didn't even know it existed, a post-9/11 creation buried in the sub-basement of the Pentagon, designed for catastrophic continuity operations. The place where unthinkable scenarios were supposed to be managed. Nuclear strikes, government collapse, communications blackouts. And there, deep in the chilled underground, Maggie found something she couldn't explain. The Janus logs had been accessed, not recently, constantly. For the last 72 hours, the system had been pinged by a remote node, rerouting through multiple global proxies. But one trace stuck out. It originated from Greenland. She stared, jaw slack. Why would Trump route a covert operation through an abandoned US military base in Greenland? Unless he had someone there. Someone operating completely outside US jurisdiction. Someone invisible. Her mind raced, but before she could process it, her access was revoked. Security stormed in. A man in a gray suit, eyes cold and unreadable, escorted her out without a word. No badge, no name, just a whisper as the door closed behind her. Stop digging. Back in her hotel, Maggie cracked for the first time in years. She stared at the white noise of the television, numb. Had she gone too far? Would they come after her next? What if Trump really was just playing games, and she'd burned every bridge chasing a ghost? She thought about calling Glenn. She didn't. Maybe he'd already been silenced. The silence scared her more than any threat. But then, a knock on the door. Maggie froze. No one knew where she was. She crept to the peephole. A teenage bellhop stood awkwardly in the hallway, holding a manila envelope. "Miss Hart?" he called. "Someone left this for you downstairs. Said it was urgent." She opened the door slowly, took the envelope, and shut it again without a word. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a single flash drive and a note. "If you're reading this, it means the firewall is down. Play the audio. Do not trust the news." Her laptop screen blinked to life. The voice on the recording was unmistakable. It was Trump. Not a speech, not a broadcast, but a private message. "I told them it was never about 2020 or 2024. The elections were just camouflage. The real play is what comes after they think I've lost." He paused, then added, colder than she'd ever heard him. and they never saw it coming. Maggie's heart pounded in her chest as the recording played on, Trump's voice slicing through the stillness of her hotel room. The words, calm and controlled, were chilling in their implications. This wasn't just a campaign promise or a political maneuver. This was something far more calculated, something that had been building beneath the surface long before anyone could comprehend it. I've been preparing for years, Trump's voice continued, steady and deliberate. It wasn't about me running again. No. It was about showing them all how to break the system, and then build it anew. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. She'd heard rumors, whispers from old colleagues who'd suspected something was off in the final months of Trump's presidency. But nothing had prepared her for this. The cold precision, the calm confidence that spoke to something bigger than just one man's ambition. "What do you think you can do?" he continued. "You think you've uncovered my plan, but you're just catching up. The next phase is already in motion." The recording cut off abruptly, leaving Maggie in stunned silence. She stared at the screen for a long moment, mind racing. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't just another power play. It was a revolution in the making, a revolution he was directing from the shadows. But then, a knock on the door. Her stomach dropped. Who could it be? She hadn't even finished processing what she'd just heard. Was she in danger? Had someone followed her from the Pentagon? The fear clawed at her as she crept toward the door, peeking through the peephole. No one. But the hallway was empty. And there, on the floor, was another envelope. This one more urgent than the last. Her hands shook as she grabbed it, ripping. It opened with more force than necessary. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a single line of text, written in bold letters. "The Janus Protocol is activated. The countdown has begun. There's no way back." Her blood ran cold. The Janus Protocol. She'd heard rumors of it, but no one had ever confirmed its existence. Some kind of fail-safe, a backup system for the country's most sensitive operations, meant to be triggered in the event of a national emergency. But Maggie had never imagined it could be anything more than a theoretical concept. Until now. And the countdown. The note didn't elaborate, but Maggie knew exactly what that meant. Time was running out. But for what? In that moment, something clicked. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't forming a picture of a man trying to get back to power. No. This was about destabilization on a scale no one could have predicted. Trump wasn't trying to reclaim the presidency. He was planning something more dangerous. He was orchestrating the unraveling of the entire system. The infrastructure, the communication lines, the financial networks. Everything that made the country run was in danger of being torn apart, piece by piece. Maggie suddenly realized the stakes were far higher than she'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about exposing a politician's secret plan. This was about saving the very foundation of the country itself. Her phone buzzed. A message from Glenn. "It's worse than you think. I've seen the final order. Trump's plan doesn't just target Washington, it targets the world." Her pulse quickened. The weight of his words hit her all at once. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of something much bigger. And she had a choice to make. Was she willing to risk everything to stop a man who was willing to burn it all down? The clock was ticking. Maggie knew she had moments, maybe hours, to stop what was unfolding. The Janus Protocol was real, and it was already in motion. Trump's plan wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a strategy to break the nation, to fracture its alliances, its economy, and its very foundation, piece by piece. And the countdown was coming to an end. Her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Maggie." It was Glenn. His voice was thick with urgency. "They've activated the second stage. The communications blackout is already spreading to critical infrastructure." Maggie's mind raced. "What's the second stage?" "A cyber attack. Targeting everything. Government servers, military networks, banking systems. If it hits the right sectors, it'll cripple the US for months, maybe longer. I don't even know if there's a backup plan." The sheer audacity of it all nearly paralyzed her. Was it even possible to stop this? Was this it? The moment everything changed? "I can't do this alone," she said, her voice faltering for the first time. "No," Glenn replied. You're not alone. There's someone else. A chill ran down Maggie's spine. Who? Before he could answer, the phone went dead. Her heart hammered in her chest. Panic rose, and she shoved the phone into her pocket, scrambling for her laptop. She was already deep in a world of black market cyber warfare, trying to track down the hidden triggers of the attack when her hotel room's lights flickered. The systems were failing. Everything was falling apart. In that moment, Maggie made a decision. She wasn't going to let the system collapse without a fight. She knew the Janus Protocol well enough to know that its final failsafe was buried deep in the U.S. Strategic Command System, deep underground in a nondescript bunker near Cheyenne Mountain. If she could get there, she could override the final step of the countdown, isolate the damage, and hopefully buy enough time for the government to regain control. She grabbed her bag, threw on her coat, and bolted out the door, no time to waste. Back at the Pentagon, a different battle was raging. General Marcus Breyer stood in front of a large map on the wall, watching as his team worked frantically to deploy the third phase of the operation. The first two stages had gone off without a hitch. Global communications were in disarray, and a massive financial collapse was well underway. He had no doubt that Trump's vision was coming to fruition. But something gnawed at him, a creeping feeling that Maggie Hart, the investigator, was too close to uncovering the truth. She was the only variable he couldn't control. Breyer's hand trembled as he reached for the command code to push the operation into its final phase, the disintegration of the country's political structure. But before he could hit the button, a voice broke through the chaos. "It's over, General." Breyer turned, his face flushed with shock. Maggie stood in the doorway, her eyes blazing with defiance, laptop open in her hands. Behind her, a team of hackers she had recruited in desperation now gathered in the room, wielding their own set of skills to breach the fortress of firewalls that protected the Janus Protocol's final layer. "What are you doing here?" Breyer snarled. His voice was low, lethal. "I'm stopping you," Maggie said simply. "Stopping him." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tapping in commands faster than the general could process. She was in. They were in. "You can't," Breyer spat. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you. You can't." "I already know what you're trying to do," Maggie interrupted, her voice a low growl of determination. "And I know how to stop it." The hum of servers around them grew louder, the tension palpable. Maggie's breath was coming in short bursts, but she never wavered. She'd come too far. The weight of everything, the country, the future, her own life, was on this moment. With a final click, the systems locked up. A moment of silence. Then, a message flashed across the screen. "Janus Protocol, deactivation complete." Breyer's face went white. The power he had spent months carefully cultivating was slipping through his fingers. He lunged toward Maggie, but she was faster. With the push of a button, her team activated a series of firewall blocks that locked out every single trace of the protocol from their control. Outside, the air felt different, clearer. The chaos had stopped, the countdown had ended. The systems were coming back online, slowly but surely, as federal communications were restored. The stock market stabilized, and the world held its breath. Maggie stood still, trembling, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on her. It wasn't over. Not yet. But they had won this round. The days following the deactivation of the Janus Protocol were a blur. Maggie had spent the next week in constant communication with Glenn, piecing together the final moments of Trump's audacious plan. The authorities quickly moved in, sweeping through key sites to arrest those who'd orchestrated the attacks. General Breyer was taken into custody, his role as a shadow operator revealed for the first time. But the biggest question remained. Who else was involved? And how deep did Trump's web of influence reach? Maggie, though, didn't care about the answers to those questions anymore. The country had survived the storm, but the damage to its core had been immense. The fractures in the system weren't just from the cyber attacks. They were from years of division, from trust eroded in every corner of society. It was a fight for its soul, not just its infrastructure. Maggie found herself back in Washington, though her role in the events had been kept under wraps. She wasn't a hero. No one wanted her to be. The government couldn't risk making her a symbol when they were still picking up the pieces. But that didn't matter. She had stopped it, prevented the absolute collapse of everything. In the quiet of her apartment, Maggie finally allowed herself to reflect on what she'd learned. She wasn't just an investigator anymore. She was someone who had seen how fragile power could be, how easily the world could be tilted from beneath us, and how vital it was to have the courage to fight for what was right. The phone rang. It was Glenn. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she smiled. But the weight of the journey still hung heavy. What now? The work's just begun. The real challenge is rebuilding. There was a pause. But we'll rebuild. Together. As she hung up, Maggie looked out her window at the glowing city skyline. It was still standing, just as she was. And somehow, in the quiet aftermath of all the chaos, she knew one thing for sure. The world had changed. But as long as there were people like her, willing to fight when no one else could, there was still hope. Sometimes, it's not about winning the game. It's about making sure the game isn't lost forever.